Middle of the country, but not middle of the road opinions. It's the podcast dedicated to sports in the air capital of the world.
I'm going to Wichita.
Wichita, Kansas, and beyond. With Tommy Castor and Weston Mills, this is Keeper of the Games.
Hey, welcome to Keeper of the Games. It is the podcast that talks about everything sports related in the air capital of Wichita, Kansas, and beyond. Along with Weston Mills, I'm Tommy Castor. Hope you've had a great weekend, ready to kick off another week. And we're here to talk about some of the big topics happening in the world of sports. Want to introduce Weston. Hope you're having a great weekend, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Had some real nice weather up here in Kansas City. Went kayaking yesterday, and I told my wife when we left, I said, this is the most normal Saturday I felt like we've had in a month and a half. You know, honestly, we left in the morning to go out to the lake and kayak for a little bit and came back, and it didn't feel like it wasn't just a normal Saturday that we've had in the past.
Yeah, you kind of wonder if things are maybe slowly but surely starting to get back to normal a little bit. Some of the states are starting to reopen. I know here in Kansas, we're kind of slowly reopening things. So it kind of makes me think that, hey, summer's almost here. Maybe things are starting to get back to normal. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about on the show today. Before we dive in to those topics, let's remind you on how you can connect with us. First off, make sure you download and subscribe. You can listen to our podcast, be notified every time there's a brand new video or brand new episode dropping. You can listen on all the major podcast platforms out there. We're talking iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, and more. And of course, you can also follow us on social media. First off, find us on YouTube and Facebook to watch full episodes of the podcast. Search for Keeper of the Games right there, and you can watch those episodes. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CogPod. And don't forget to check out our new website. That's cogpod.weebly.com. So with all of that out of the way, let's jump in and talk about some of the big stories going on. First and foremost, one of the biggest documentaries of the last probably 12 months has been The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, and the show following the final season of the Bulls dynasty back in the late 90s. And kind of the tie-in to this area, the state of Kansas, is Tex Winter, who was obviously one of the primary assistant coaches during that entire Bulls dynasty run in the 90s. And for people that didn't know, Tex Winter was also the former head coach at Kansas State University. He's also the guy that pioneered the triangle offense. I don't know about you, Weston, but it's been kind of cool the last couple of episodes to sort of see his influence on Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson, and that entire Bulls team.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting too, because, college basketball and NBA they're two different products. So to see one of the most prolific offenses in probably the history of the NBA to really derive from a coach that, came up with Kansas State and was in coaching college basketball, I think was really fascinating and something that I absolutely had no knowledge of until watching this documentary. So I thought that was really cool and really interesting to see.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I thought it was really interesting. I think it was either episode 3 or episode 4 of the documentary, talking about how the triangle offense was implemented in Chicago. And, I had never really connected the dots that essentially that offense originally was designed to limit the scoring of Michael Jordan. I mean, not really limit it, but to spread the ball out a little bit more and make, a bunch of different options available on the court for scoring opportunities. And before that time, it would have been prior to Doug Collins coming in as the head coach. You basically put the ball in Michael Jordan's hands. He went out there and created, and obviously, in my opinion, the best basketball player of all time.
Right.
And he showed that in the late 80s. Tex Winter came around and kind of taught Phil Jackson the triangle offense. And then all of a sudden, Michael Jordan himself had to get on board with the fact that he wasn't going to be able to be the one to handle the ball all the time. He had to get the ball through his teammates. I thought that was a really interesting dynamic shift, especially in the mind of Jordan, a guy that went out and scored a ton of points every night, to all of a sudden having to share the ball.
Right. And it always goes full circle. I talk about this a lot with really any sport, but I mean, basically the whole idea was, yes, you're going to touch the ball more, but it makes teams guard those other guys. It makes teams have to stay with Scottie Pippen, stay with Horace Grant, stay with Steve Kerr, instead of just throwing everyone at Jordan. So it made Jordan become a much more efficient basketball player and, of course, scorer when he had the ball. So I agree. I mean, it was really cool to see. And, I don't think, as young as I was in the early Bulls years, I think it's hard to have appreciation for for really what they did with that offense, Phil Jackson, and obviously, like we've mentioned, Tex Winter starting that whole thing. So really, really cool to see.
Yeah, without a doubt. Tex had gotten to that point in his career in the late '80s and early '90s where he wasn't going to be a head coach anymore. He had a lot of success in Manhattan. In fact, when he was the head coach there for 15 years, he compiled a 261 to 118 record. And he owns the record for most league titles in school history. The Wildcats went to the Final Four twice in '58 and '64. They went to the postseason 7 times overall. And he boasts one of the highest winning percentages in K-State's history. So, that was back in the 50s and 60s. And, he was running that offense. He kind of pioneered it. And, K-State had a lot of success back in those days. Now, obviously, the success has been sort of up and down, ever since then for the Wildcats. But, Winter went, to several different other places, ended up in Chicago, where he really became, not only a mentor to Phil Jackson, but also became a kind of a mentor of sorts to Michael Jordan as well. So when you think of that prolific and dynamic Bulls offense, you got to think of Tex Winter. And, obviously the guy spent a ton of time in Kansas. So I kind of like that connection right there when you look at what he was able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously it's cool for us that, there is that Kansas connection, but I always think it's cool too that, obviously when you think of the triangle offense, you think of Phil Jackson, Michael Jordan, and then obviously the Lakers after that. But it's really cool that this documentary is shedding light and giving some credit to the guy, who really originated this offense. And otherwise, I think a majority of people would have no idea, that this was Tex Winter's brainchild.
Right, absolutely. He was kind of the guy that sort of sat back and was the teacher, while Phil Jackson was the kind of the one that, was the general, kind of led everybody, all the players. And, Tex got to sit back and just sort of be able to instruct and lead. And so that was pretty exciting to watch him and kind of get a chance to see, his handprint on that Bulls dynasty in the previous episodes of The Last Dance. Obviously, that documentary series continues on ESPN every Sunday night, and it's been really great so far, and really one of the few sports-related activities I think that people can really get into during this time that we're all living in. So that Kansas connection with Tex Winter. We're going to transition into another story that we teased on the last episode of the podcast. We didn't really get a chance to talk about in depth, but we're going to talk about it on this episode, and that is the NCAA adopting recommendations or thoughts on college athletes being able to use their name, image, and likeness in endorsements moving forward. And that would begin in the 2021-2022 school year. So we'll dive into that, talk a little bit about what that kind of looks like for the collegiate athlete and our opinions and our takes on really what this does and if it goes far enough for the collegiate athlete. So I'll let you kick things off, Weston, kind of your thoughts on the fact that finally now the NCAA is going to let these college athletes be able to use their name, image, and likeness to make some money.
Yeah, I've always thought that this was going to be the next step. I know there are arguments forward and backwards, and it could be a 3-day podcast talking about whether players should get paid or not. But I've always felt like this was the compromise that was going to happen and should happen. I mean, basically, to take away the ability for someone to say, hey, you can't use your name or likeness to profit for yourself seems like a crazy, conversation to have. But I think this was the big step. I think the NCAA knew that this was going to come down the pipe, that they would have to make some compromises or risk, Power 5 schools basically saying, hey, we're going to break away and the NCAA crumble. I mean, there was a lot of talk of that, a few years back as there was a bigger push for players to get paid. And obviously the schools like, Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Texas, those schools would be able to survive and thrive and pay their players where, I think of schools like, you've got Kent State, you've got, a lot of the schools that are in the conference with Wichita State, maybe Wichita State itself would just really struggle to be able to pay these athletes. I mean, particularly when you look at different sports, right? I mean, football is what brings in the most, and you got probably a 75 player roster and spreading out there. But okay, how about the women's golf team, the men's lacrosse team, those kind of things. So to me, this was always the compromise that made the most sense. Let the players just go forward and say, okay, what if someone wants to pay you to come sit down take a photo of your face and slap it on their billboard, we'll let you do it. Or if someone wants to pay you to sign your names to some footballs at a dealership, then we'll go ahead and allow you to do that. And you're going to be able to dictate your own financial worth, basically. So I think it's a good compromise, and I think this will be kind of the resting point in this discussion for a while before any other steps move forward.
Here's my thought, and you kind of touched on it, a couple of minutes ago when you first started talking. Every single one of us is allowed to profit off of our name, our image, and our likeness, except if you were a college athlete. And, so forever, this argument was out there about how, well, they're amateurs. They shouldn't be able to profit off of their name. They should just be playing for love of the game. And that, that's bull. And I think back in the day, it was probably a little bit easier to have that argument because how many opportunities were out there unless you were, the huge superstar like a Michael Jordan at North Carolina? How many opportunities did you really have to profit off your name, image, and likeness? Where nowadays with social media, it's super easy, to potentially profit off of that. You could have, somebody wanting you to promote a product or a service on Instagram, and they'll throw you some money. That couldn't happen if you were a college athlete. And so I think this is the right next step to take. The NCAA, they will go down swinging before they let institutions pay their players, pay their students. That's not going to happen as far as the NCAA is concerned. But being able to say, all right, well, we'll go ahead and remove the restrictions that, players are able to, make endorsement deals, or they're able to, lend their name or their likeness, to a business in their community. It could be a local car dealer and wanting the quarterback of the football team to come out and sign autographs for an hour, and they'll pay you a little bit, so I think, or maybe, a photo of them on a billboard, I think that's I kind of agree with you. That's the next step, I think. I don't think it goes far enough, but I think at least for right now, it's a decent compromise.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. NCAA, they're not going to pay players. That, for folks who keep wanting to chime that whistle and say that's what's going to happen, that will never happen. You're absolutely right. The NCAA will dissolve before that'll happen. And like I said when I started this thing, I know that conversation can be had and argued ad nauseum, but I don't think the players should be paid. I think this is the perfect compromise where they can, look, they're not, if someone wants to pay them money, just like any, an English major or this or that can go get a job or take an internship in their career. This gives them that opportunity. If someone wants to pay them for their time, they can do that. I think that's absolutely reasonable. I do think it's going to be very interesting to see, though, how this plays out when you start to get down this road and you've got football teams having every player making money off of their likeness. And now we look at maybe the women's basketball team or the men's golf team, and maybe they don't have people reaching out to them saying, hey, I'd love to have you come down and, sign some autographs or take a picture for our billboard. Are we going to start to see a shift of those folks saying, hey, what's going on? Like, I'm not getting any of this share, and to me, and that's kind of the, the free market that we live in. That's how it should be dictated. I think that's kind of what the NCAA is ultimately going to do, is doing here, is saying, fine, if you want money, if money is what you're saying is not right here, you go do it. You go get it. We'll allow you to do this now, but don't come to us for balance of this. And Again, I've said this way too many times. I'm sure it's annoying for our listeners, but the lawyer brain in me goes, I wonder what's going to happen when the men's basketball team is making serious money off of this and the women's basketball team is not. I think at some point we're going to cross this road where this becomes an issue.
I think that we would be really naive in saying that this is just solely, the NCAA's position on this forever, for the last 100 years, is solely about these kids remaining amateurs for the love of the game. I think that's an incredibly naive take, and I don't think that's the way that it is. Maybe originally that was the way that take was, but that's not what it has turned into. This has simply been the NCAA being a monopoly and not wanting to not have to pay their players because they don't want to have to share the wealth. That's all it is. You've got these coaches. We could talk for hours about, these coaches that are making millions of dollars a year. In some cases, they're the highest paid state employee. But then you've got these players that in a lot of cases, have $5 to their name. They can't go buy themselves dinner, and then we trot them out on the grand stage where people are spending tens and hundreds of millions of dollars on merchandise and tickets and all of this stuff. And everybody else is profiting off of it except for the collegiate player because of some love of the game. It's ridiculous. That's not what it's about. That's not what it's ever been about. It's been about, we don't want to have to share the money that we made with more people. That's all it is. And so I think that being able to say, all right, these players are going to be able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness, that sort of takes the onus off of the NCAA because the NCAA is not paying them. These outside endorsers are. Mm-hmm. So the NCAA still doesn't have to share the wealth. It's going to be the local Ford dealer or a shoe company or, whatever who are paying these players. It's not the NCAA sharing their millions and millions and millions of dollars in profit. So while I say I think it's a good compromise right now, I don't think that it is a fully genuine and forthcoming solution, a long-term solution. I think it's a good first step.
Yeah, so I'm going to, I guess, kind of disagree with you, but agree with you the same. And I'm going to start out by saying, like we've now mentioned a couple times, I think we both are in agreement that this allowing players to use their likeness and image is a great thing, and I think it's perfect for what's going on right now. But where I disagree with you, and it's not even that I necessarily disagree with players shouldn't be allowed to be paid. But I've kind of got two things that really just stick in my brain with this that no matter how many arguments I hear, I can't shake. One, I think of all the kids at NAI schools like you and me attended, or D3, even some D2, a lot of JUCOs that don't get full ride scholarships. So to me, I will not hear the argument that they are not getting compensation, because the $100,000 in debt that all of those kids who didn't get full ride scholarships are telling me, like, you cannot tell me that $100,000 is not. Now, we can argue whether is that fair compensation. Totally understand if that's the merits you want to get into, but don't tell me they're not getting compensated, because that is worth something. But then number two, and I know that there's complete circles that we go on this, but I think sometimes we focus on the wrong group here too, right? Like, I know a lot of the anger with this is focused at the NCAA, but here's my thing. It's the NBA who doesn't allow you to go straight from high school and make money. It's the NFL that doesn't allow you to go straight from high school to make money. If you want to go, you do not have to go to college. If you want to go train for 3 years and try to make the NFL, by all means, go do it. If you want to go play basketball overseas, like we've seen kids now doing, by all means, go do it. Like, you can go make money. Now, I understand that is not a very easy route to take, and you can say that's unrealistic. But again, it's not the NCAA who's saying you can't go straight from high school to the NFL, or you can't go straight from high school to the NBA. So I just think that sometimes it's the focus on the NCAA being the devil in not allowing them to get paid is just kind of misguided sometimes.
Well, I disagree with you, because I think that they are in this regard. I think they want to keep their hands on their profits as much as possible and not spread it around at all. With the players that are allowing them to make these profits in the first place, we could talk about whether or not there's collusion between the NCAA and the NBA, or the NCAA and the NFL, and they collaborate together to try to keep players from entering those sports right away, and whether or not there's cooperation between the parties. I think that there probably is, and I think there probably has been, for a long time. I think that probably one of the biggest reasons why you're starting to see the foundation crumble a little bit, from the hard stance that the NCAA has had forever about this, is because of the stories that, like with the G League, and these players that are now completely bypassing the NCAA to make some money at the G League and then hopefully go to the NBA from there. So there are starting to be some other routes where you don't have to necessarily go overseas to play basketball and make some money and then go to the NBA. It doesn't mean that you're completely shut out from that world. So I think now the NCAA is thinking, Well, all right, well, we're going to have to try to stay relevant somehow. Is there any kind of concession that we can make? What does that look like? Can we allow them to profit off of their likeness? Can we allow them to be endorsers and make endorsement deals? My career, prior to the last, 6 months, I worked in the radio industry where we did endorsement deals all the time. They're not that difficult to do. And, I'm not an athlete, but I endorsed several different things over the course of my career. So if I can do it, then a 19-year-old athlete that has supreme athletic ability more so than I do, they should fully be allowed to endorse products and make money off of that. There's not an issue. One of my biggest complaints with the NCAA in what they're doing, number one, is that, I think everybody's saying, like they're going to finally allow you to, use your name, image, and likeness. Well, not so fast. They've only made recommendations. There hasn't been any sort of decision that's actually been made. They've recommended that it be ratified to where the players are able to do that. So number one, I think we're a little bit ahead of the game on congratulating the NCAA. But number two is that it sounds like the NCAA wants to be congratulated. Like, hey, way to go, NCAA. Look at what you decided for the students. You're years and years and years behind allowing these players to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. If I'm a collegiate athlete from 20 years ago, this pisses me off that, now these guys are able to do so, and I couldn't do it, back when I was a student. So I think we need to sort of hold our congratulations for the NCAA and instead congratulate the players who are finally able to make some money off of their name, image, and likeness.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. I think two things too. For just when you get back, now we get back to talking about the competition standpoint and not so much the merits of whether this is good or not. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they regulate it, because I think that also in part is why the NCAA would say this is a good idea. With all the stuff that's been coming out about, particularly in the basketball realm, of guys getting paid or getting this and that, this is supposed to kind of be okay, we're going to bring it to light so that we can now control it. And there's not all these backdoor deals going on under the radar. Teams, we don't want our big stars getting in trouble. We don't want our blue blood programs getting in trouble. But I think because you're going to have some issues, right? I would think with, where do you draw the line of the car dealership paying the low, let's say it's Kansas State's, Skylar Thompson. Let's say the car dealership wants to pay him $400,000 for one appearance. And you're starting to go, okay, well, that seems interesting. That seems like a lot of money. Where are you getting this? How far does the NCAA go on seeing, okay, well, did the car dealership get this money from somewhere? And not to say that I think that's all a problem or this or that. You just know that the NCAA is going to want a hand in exactly how this is all run. So I'd be very curious to see how it turns out. And then, like I said, from a competitive standpoint, I think this very well is going to hurt the mid-majors. I think it's going to be even better for the blue bloods that have boosters or bigger infrastructure around them to have those opportunities, to be able to say, hey, you come to our program, we've got Joe Schmo, who's at the car dealership down here. He's given the last quarterback of this team, $100,000 autograph session every year for the last 10 years. But then on the other hand, I think of a Wichita State or, maybe a smaller school in a bigger city. So if you take Wichita compared to Lawrence, say, you're going to have a lot more people in Wichita, or not people, but businesses in Wichita that might be able to be interested in bringing in a kid to do endorsement. So does a place like Wichita that maybe doesn't have a bigger college basketball program maybe now have more of an advantage because they've got more opportunity for you to make money and all that, like where Chicago Loyola, places like that is kind of what I'm thinking maybe too.
Here's the thing, I think that you look at the NCAA right now, and one of the things that in their recommendations that they said was that they want to make sure that with these recommendations that there are, quote, guardrails that will help protect the student athlete and protect against what they call overzealous boosters. What I find interesting about that language is that I've never heard the NCAA be concerned about overzealous boosters when it comes to donating money to the institution, right? Mm-hmm. Because that money, portion of that money goes to the NCAA. So they're never concerned about that, but all of a sudden they're concerned about overzealous boosters with the student athlete. They're not concerned about the student athlete. They're not concerned. They're concerned about money going to the student athlete when it should, in their minds, be going to the institution. They're also really protective of the brands, which I understand that to an extent. But one of the recommendations is that players can use their name. They can also say what school they go to, but logos cannot be used of the universities. They can't use any of that, branding material. So it makes me wonder, is that going to hurt chances of endorsement? Like, are you going to want your star player for the university, but you can't use the logo of the school in any of the ads? I don't know. I don't know if that really matters all of that much, but it's clear to me, number one, the NCAA, at the end of the day, they're concerned about their bottom line, their profits, and they're concerned about their branding and none of that being damaged. And I get that to an extent, but at the same time, don't sell it to me like you're trying to protect the student athlete. You're not. You're looking out for your own pocketbook.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe I think you kind of look at the NCAA fundamentally different than I do. I kind of look at it from a perspective of, of course they're going to try to protect their profits. That's what a business does. And I get, NCAA, being associated with university and they're pitching student athlete and this and that. But that's what a business does. That's what NCAA is.
But here's the thing. Here's the difference, though, is that the NCAA, I totally agree with you. Like in a free market world, they totally should be able to protect their profits and do what they need to do. But at the same time, you've got these student athletes. And, in almost every other industry out there, when you've got the guys at the top that are making all the money and you've got the schlubs underneath that are the ones that are doing all the hard work to allow the guys at the top to make the money, in a lot of cases, those industries have what we call unions to protect those people that are in those industries. It's not like the student athletes have a union. It's not like there's anybody advocating for them, standing up for them and saying they need to be making money. You've got the NCAA, they're an institution, an organization. People are making a lot of money off of these players, and there's never been anybody to advocate for them and stand up and raise their hand and say, these people need to be protected. And so it's because of the competition now with things like the G League and other avenues for these players to go and make some money and then go to the pros. I think it has the NCAA scared, and that's why they're willing to give this minor concession.
Yeah, and I definitely don't agree with. I definitely do agree with that. But I guess I go back to the fact that the more and more we start to have competition, the less and less I want to hear people saying, oh, they're forced into this system of not making money. When you have other options, then go do it. If really the money is what you care about, then go do it. You can even, heck, for the football guys, what was the last Wichita team, the arena team, Wichita, they were like 5 different things, the Bombers, the Wild. Yeah. Go do that. You're going to get a paycheck. And if you think you're talented enough, you don't think you'll get, I know that's far-fetched, but that's just there are other options. Don't tell me you have to go to school if you don't like what's being put in front of you. But nonetheless, I do think we are completely on the same page. I think this is the concession that needed to be made. I don't think you should ever tell someone, hey, you can't use your own name or your own face to make money. I think that's a crazy decision that was ever made from the beginning. And I think that this is going to take the NCAA in a good direction. And really, even with the loss of, when you're losing players to the G League and this and that, I think most college fans, you're not going to notice that top end talent. It is such a minute difference that I don't think that the average fan is going to be able to see a difference in. And I say that in the lens of obviously with the G League thing that's going on, but also when I talk about a shift in players going to some of the bigger schools or maybe spreading out a little bit, I don't think you're really going to see a shift in talent. I don't think most fans can tell those minute differences between the player that's the top of the top and who's just very close to the top of the top,
And most fans are also not going to watch a game on the field or a game in an arena and say, man, these players are not playing nearly as well they must be making money now, or they must not love the game as much anymore.
Right.
Like, that's such a stupid argument.
Yeah.
The final thing I'll say about the NCAA, and this is why I think you and I might be fundamentally different in our opinion about the NCAA. And you as an attorney, I think, can relate to this a little bit. It wasn't that long ago, I mean, just over a year ago, that the NCAA was ruled against by a federal judge in an antitrust lawsuit, saying that football and basketball players should be permitted to receive more compensation from schools. So the NCAA, by a judge's ruling, is not innocent in all of this, and in some cases have intentionally withheld compensation from players that are deserving of some. So I understand the purpose the NCAA serves, but at the end of the day, they have fought tooth and nail, millions and millions and millions of dollars in lobbying to Congress and to try to prevent these student athletes from making money. So the fact that now they're rolling out these, quote, recommendations about how these players should receive compensation for their name, image, and likeness, it almost sounds like they want a pat on the back. You fought tooth and nail against this for so long. I'm not going to congratulate you. This is what you should have done a long time ago.
The only thing that I'm going to add to that comment real quick is just that judges are wrong, and they're wrong a lot. Let me tell you that. Which actually, maybe we shouldn't. Don't play this podcast in front of any judges in the Wichita area or in the Kansas City area. I guess, and the only the one last thing I'll add, and it's not even so much of a comment or an opinion on what's going on, but this does not get us any closer to bringing the NCAA football games or basketball games back. They're not going to allow teams to throw their image and likeness there yet. I mean, I there's a lot of money to be had. I think eventually we will get there. But again, it kind of goes back to my conversation about how certain teams and certain sports and certain genders are profiting more than the other. If you bring back NCAA football and that school profits, and I have no idea what the money is, but let's just say it's a $10 million check. Well, who gets that money? Does it just go to the football team because it was off of NCAA football sales? What happens to the women's golf team but they don't have any video game and they're not, so why should they? I mean, those are the questions that are going to have to be asked and have to be answered before you, I think, before you kind of get those, the EA sports type stuff back in our life.
And there have always been those questions about, you've got the couple of programs, football and basketball especially, that in a lot of cases are the only moneymakers in the entire athletic department, and they're the ones that allow financially these other programs to survive. Mm-hmm. So I will say I do agree with you. I wish that those games would come back sooner rather than later, because especially the NCAA basketball was a lot of fun back in the day. So hopefully those come back someday for sure. We're going to stay on the topic of college athletics, this time in college football. We talked about this topic at length a couple of weeks ago when it was just pure speculation. So we're not going to get deep into the weeds on this because I think it's pretty clear what our opinions are on this. However, the ink has dried. The contracts have been signed. Kansas and Missouri will be renewing the Border Showdown, a 4-game football series happening in about 5 years from now is when the first game happens, extending all the way into the early 2030s. And it's 2 games in Columbia, 2 games in Lawrence. It's official now. It's a ways off. I'm assuming that you're doubling down on your claim that this is good for both institutions?
I really think so. I will say one thing, though. What I wish they would have done, and I mean, I don't know, maybe there's a lot more going on in this, but I wish they would have done 2 in Lawrence, 2 in Columbia, and a 5th at Arrowhead, which I've actually heard some mixed reviews on that. I know like Pitt State and Northwest Missouri State, they do a game at Arrowhead every year, and I hear a lot of mixed reviews about how it actually works out when you have it there. But I think that'd kind of be fun with Kansas City, being such a split market between Kansas and Missouri fans. But overall, I think it's fun. And one thing I think you and I can agree on this is the atmosphere for both those Kansas and Missouri games would be a fun one to be at.
Of course, it's well documented. My opinion on this. I think it's awful. I think it's terrible. Let sleeping dogs lie. The rivalry was great while it lasted. Don't try to artificially contrive this back up. The last time these 2 teams played was in 2011. The next time they'll play will be 2025. So you're talking a span of almost 15 years between matchups. And by that point, it's the rivalry is just it's dead. Like, it's dead now. It'll be dead in 5 years, And so I think if fans are expecting to go out and see the kind of atmosphere that they saw when this rivalry was in its heyday, I think you're mistaken. I know that on social media over the last couple of days, at least with Kansas, they were replaying one of the previous border wars between the two teams. And that was back in the days when, Kansas had Mark Mangino. And, I know Kerry Meyer had a big game for the Jayhawks with, the one that they were, re-showing on social media. And I watched some of it and I thought, it's not going to be like that coming back. It's not. These programs are completely different now. You've got a Missouri team in the SEC that is kind of middle of the road and probably will continue that way for a while. You've got a Kansas team that would beg to be middle of the road in the Big 12 right now. This is not going to be the same Border Showdown, and I think it's a waste of time. I really don't think it's necessary.
Well, and I'll definitely that's one area where I think we definitely can agree on. Also, is this? The rivalry is definitely, and these games are not going to have the same feel if Kansas is still where they're at as a program when this series kicks off. I mean, it's just kind of like we've seen. And I don't mean this to slight Kansas State fans in any way, but in the years when Kansas State basketball has not been good. And, those games, while they're rivalry games, they don't really have a very serious rivalry feel to it because Kansas State at times has just not been able to keep up on the basketball court. And same with football. I mean, it doesn't feel like a real rivalry game between Kansas State and Kansas on the football field because Kansas can't keep up. And if that's the case going into Kansas and Missouri, I still think it's good for the program. I still think it's great and all that. But to that end of how it'll feel, I think you're right, and it won't feel great if if Kansas doesn't bring their level up a few notches before going into Columbia.
Yeah, at the end of the day, this is a scenario, and we talked about it the last time we talked about this topic. It's a way to try to make money. It's a way to try to drum up these two fan bases that have passionately hated each other forever and try to get money out of them and tickets and merchandise and beers and concessions and things like that. That's ultimately what it comes down to. It's not about the rivalry because it's not going to be the same. My opinion also is that Missouri left for the SEC for a reason. Let them stay in the SEC. They're the ones that ended the rivalry in the first place. It wasn't Kansas, it was Missouri. Let them go away. Let them be in that conference where, they get their butts kicked pretty much week in and week out. Just leave them there and let Kansas focus on what their goals are in the Big 12. I mentioned it the last time we talked about this, and this is, I think, where you and I fundamentally disagree. This is completely counterproductive to the goals that Kansas has for its program. The goals for the program are to get to a bowl game. It's not to play Missouri in the border war and win. It's to play games that you have a shot of winning so you can go to a bowl game. And, and maybe the fact that this doesn't start until 2025, we've got another 5 years to hopefully get the Kansas program relevant, and then maybe it will help their resume. But for right now, if this game were to be played in the fall, this fall, it would not help Kansas's bowl game, projections by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I mean, I can tell you two things. Either Kansas football will be better and this game will be more exciting, or this border war will be starting without Les Miles. Because at 2025, right, either they are better in being competitive week in and week out in the Big 12, or it's not Les Miles who's going into the border war.
Well, my opinion, I don't think it's going to be Les Miles regardless. I mean, by the time this first game happens, Les Miles will be in his early 70s. And I think that and this is a completely separate topic we can talk about another time, but I think my gut tells me that when Les Miles came into Kansas, he was looking at a 3 to 5 year max term at Kansas. And then the whole goal was to leave the program in a better shape than he found it, turn it over to a younger guy. And I think Brent Dearmon's going to be the guy whenever that time comes. That might be 2 or 3 years or 5 years down the line. But I think regardless if the program is better or not, I don't think Les Miles will be the one in Columbia on September 6th, 2025. I just don't see that happening.
Okay, well, look at that. We found another agreement on this. I also was, right when you brought that up, I was going to say I think Brent Dearmon's going to be the guy whenever it is that takes over for Les Miles. Yeah. So there we go. I do think you're right, at least with his predecessor. or
Yeah,
success.
so those dates, just so people are aware, they're going to start the series in Columbia on September 6th, 2025. Then they'll play the next season in Lawrence on September 12th, 2026. Then they take 4 years off. They'll play in Columbia again September 6th, 2030, and then back in Lawrence September 12th, 2032. And I'll be pretty old by that point, by the time that's all said and done. So I don't even really want to think about that. And I'm sure that my opinion will stay the same. 12 years from now? I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe we'll have the podcast going 12 years from now. You never know what things will look like.
Yeah, and then we can hash out and go, see, Tommy, it was a good thing. Kansas did win some of those games.
There we go. We'll have to mark that down, make sure we revisit it in 12 years for the final game.
That's right.
So we're going to go ahead and move on now away from the Border Showdown, which I think is a terrible decision, but we've already talked about that. And we're going to get into some Chiefs news, which, the last couple episodes of the Keeper of the Games podcast, we have talked almost exclusively about the Kansas City Chiefs. That's what happens when it's the draft season and all of that. We haven't talked about them as much in depth on this episode, but there are some news and notes to pass along. Starting off with Bashaud Breeland, we talked about Bashaud Breeland on the previous episode and about his arrest and the bad look for the Chiefs and all of that. Well, I think the bad look just got a little bit worse, and that arrest tape has now been released. I believe it started on TMZ, and of course, it's kind of spread like wildfire from there. I know you've had a chance to take a look at that arrest tape. Your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I watched the tape, and for whatever it's worth, in my opinion, I do think it was a little bit less malicious on Bashaud Breeland's part as the arrest report made it sound. But I still think he was absolutely in the wrong and a complete idiot. And I'm only going to use the word idiot, even though I've got harsher words that I'd like to use. But I will tell you that police officer, if you get a chance to watch the video, that police officer was incredibly patient with Bashaud Breeland as he would not let the guy talk to him, would not let him, he was trying to arrest him. And I guess obviously there'll be discussion about whether he should have been arrested or not, but does not comply with any of his orders. He actually got back into his car. He didn't. I think that to me, when I read either the report, the police report, or the news articles, it made it sound like Bashaud Breeland actually started to drive off. But he actually he got back into his car. And maybe it looked like that's what his intent was to do. And at that point, the police officer actually pulled his firearm on him. And then still, even at that point, Bashaud Breeland was standing next to his car, pulled the door kind of in front of him, which was goofy because the police officer still easily could have shot him, but was almost like as if that was going to shield him while he still was making decisions on whether he was going to comply or not. I mean, absolutely bizarre. And then even as he's allowing him to be arrested, you can see him pulling his arms out. He's kind of sitting down, kind of starting to stand back up, jerking all around. An older lady, maybe middle-aged, probably comes over, and you can tell that she's kind of telling him, "Hey, what are you doing? Comply." And for whatever reason, it looks like he's trying to plead with her, like that this police officer's not being is being ridiculous or this or that, but you couldn't have seen a more patient. He's lucky he did not get tased or, God forbid, shot with the way he was acting. I hope Kansas City releases him just for being an idiot. If no other reason, just for showing such poor judgment and lack of decision-making, I hope they let him go. Now, whether that happens or not, even after watching the video, I'm still not sure. He's got a 4-game suspension. I don't think a lot of the money was guaranteed. I think there's a very good chance he won't be on the roster for very much longer.
Yeah, so I know that Andy Reid, commented, said that they've watched the video, they've seen it, they've not made any sort of decisions as of this point. The sad thing, and I know this happens in sports with different franchises all the time, but for some reason it feels like the Chiefs are the team where you've got these players that just end up making foolish decisions, and then the tapes are released, and then people judge and that sort of thing. I will say one of the differences, I watched the Kareem Hunt video, not the one. Obviously, there was the one of him, kicking, the girl in the hallway. But I'm talking about the one when he was with the Browns and was pulled over and had marijuana and that sort of thing. Watching that one, I sort of felt bad for him. Like I felt sad. Like I felt sad that he had kind of fallen to that point.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel sad for Bashaud Breeland.
No.
I was irritated at him. I was like, you're an idiot. Why don't you just do what they want you to do? Why are you acting so foolish? And so there are varying levels, I think, of sympathy that you can give these players when they get themselves into bad situations. And right now, I have very little sympathy for Bashaud Breeland in the way that he acted during that traffic stop.
Yeah, no, I mean, and here's the thing, too. When you talk about, obviously, as a Chiefs fan, the first thing you think of probably is Tyreek Hill. The second thing you think of is probably Kareem Hunt. But here's the difference with Bashaud Breeland, at least from what are the Chiefs going to do. Honestly, if they cut ties with Bashaud Breeland, I think most folks, just your average fan or even just your average news taker, someone who intakes the news, may not even remember that Bashaud Breeland was, that's just a name. He's not going to be associated with the Chiefs. Now, as when Tyreek Hill was going on, you think of the Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Tyreek Hill. With Kareem Hunt, you thought of the Kansas City Chiefs running back Kareem Hunt. The Chiefs had already, took on that bad PR the second it happened. So to be patient and, obviously with Kareem, they made the decision to let him go. With Tyreek, they weathered the storm and kind of made that decision, okay, the facts are different than what they initially appeared to be, and then we can get, there's obviously a lot of discussion from there, but we're going to go ahead and keep with the guy. They let Bashaud Breeland go. I don't know that there's a whole lot of bad PR done or this or that. I think maybe it's truly just from a standpoint of, hey, if this guy's he's missing 4 games already, probably coming down the pipe with another maybe 4 games. Do we really care about keeping a guy around for 8 games that's, it's the second corner at best. They've drafted guys to eventually take over. I don't think the plan was day one, but they've got other guys on the roster, particularly I think of Rashad Fenton, that they like. It may not be even worth messing around with him to just let him go and spend that money elsewhere.
The only bad thing about Bashaud Breeland, and I agree with you that the whole scheme of things, people are going to be like, Bashaud who? Yeah. Except for the fact that he did contribute in the Super Bowl. Yeah. He did have an interception in the biggest game in Chiefs history.
Played really well,
His name is in the record books with Kansas City, cemented that he was a part of that championship team. So that is a little bit of a bummer, but I agree with you. At the end of the day, I don't think there's a huge PR nightmare. If the Chiefs do get rid of him, I think they can move on pretty quickly. Speaking of, go ahead.
Well, the only thing I was going to add is to make you, I don't know whether this will make you like him or dislike him more. I think I was a little peeved by it. The day after he was arrested, he dropped a music video showing, really showing where his priorities were.
You got to do what you got to do, right? It is what it is. Speaking of new acquisitions for the Chiefs, there are 2 new acquisitions over the last couple of days. First off, this is the most recent one. The Chiefs signed former Michigan quarterback and undrafted free agent Shea Patterson. So that's another quarterback on their roster. They've got a handful of them right now. What are the odds that Shea Patterson makes it through training camp and ends up on the roster?
This is really actually pretty interesting. I've seen a couple of people say, okay, look, it's going to be Jordan Ta'amu and Shea Patterson, battling it out to be number 3. I don't necessarily think that's what it is. I'm curious if the Kansas City is at a place now where they feel comfortable enough with Pat that they may say, hey, Shea Patterson and Jordan Ta'amu save us some money and we let Chad Henne go. I'm not saying that's what I'm predicting, but I think that has to be a possibility that we're considering if Kansas City feels comfortable enough where Pat is growing, just from a game film and a mental standpoint. He doesn't necessarily need that seasoned veteran. Now, with that being said, of course, the second part is we saw last year we had to play some games without Patrick Mahomes. And, luckily Matt Moore stepped in and did a fantastic job. So can Jordan Ta'amu and Shea Patterson show enough that Kansas City would feel comfortable with one of them as a backup? And then on the other side saying, we feel like Pat has grown enough mentally, we can do without a veteran backup quarterback presence. I don't know. And I guess I say all this just to say, I don't think it's just as clear cut as Shea Patterson and Jordan Ta'amu battling out for QB3.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because they did just recently re-sign Chad Henne to a 2-year deal. So if they were looking at bringing in a Jordan Ta'amu or a Shea Patterson to be kind of the primary backup, I'm not sure why you signed Chad Henne to a 2-year deal. You can always cut him, but I don't know why you would sign him to a 2-year deal, especially coming off the ankle injury that he had, if your intention all along is to go a little bit younger in the backup. So I think that's a little interesting. But at the same time, I'm sure that there's an opportunity potentially for a guy like Shea Patterson to end up on the practice squad potentially, for Kansas City. So, I mean, there are options. It's not like they're going to carry 4 quarterbacks into the regular season, but it'll be interesting to see through training camp and through preseason who between Jordan Ta'amu and Shea Patterson, who sort of rises above. The thing I like about Jordan Ta'amu, we've talked about him, previously, is that he does sort of, I don't want to say he models his game after Pat Mahomes, but he definitely is kind of a renegade, under center. And so he kind of reminds me a little bit the way that he moves and is mobile, kind of reminds me a little bit of that. So I kind of like him being a backup because I sort of feel like, all right, you kind of play the same style a little bit. So I do like his upside, but yeah, that battle will be interesting to see.
Yeah. And the only thing I'll add is, I think there's always somewhat of a market for backup quarterbacks. So, and again, I want to make clear, I'm not predicting. I think the most likely scenarios we have Patrick Mahomes, Chad Henne, and then one of Shea Patterson or Jordan Ta'amu. But I do think there's always a backup quarterback market. Someone gets hurt in training camp, or particularly maybe a backup gets hurt in training camp, and now all of a sudden that opens up that opportunity to ship Chad Henne somewhere. If you have the flexibility of saying we actually feel comfortable with our current number 3 and number 4, obviously something like that would happen during training camp and not after. And it'll be curious to see actually what happens with football training camps as we kind of move on in this Corona era. So I think that'll all be very interesting.
Shea Patterson played 2 seasons at Ole Miss and then 2 at Michigan, and actually had a really good season last year. Threw for over 3,000 yards with 23 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. The other big acquisition for Kansas City over the last 72 hours or so, defensive end Taco Charlton agreed to a 1-year deal with Kansas City. So he lasted a little over 2 years in Dallas, of course, was drafted in the first round by the Cowboys, and then played less than 1 year for Miami. Now he's off to Kansas City. Weston, defensive end was an area that I think the Chiefs kind of looked at a little bit in the draft. I mean, I know that they drafted to that need a little bit. Are you surprised by this pick, and how do you think Taco Charlton will fit into Kansas City?
No, I think this is a fantastic pickup. I mean, it feels like a very good Brett Veach move. I mean, they lost Emmanuel Ogbah, and basically they signed Taco, and they've got the infrastructure in place that if he continues to kind of be this bust that he's been, it's not a whole lot of risk for Kansas City. But I mean, he's 6'6", 270 pounds, had an incredible athletic ability. The upside for him has always been through the roof, and that's that is why he went in the first round. And I think he probably does fit better in a traditional 4-3 than a 3-4 defense. Kansas City plays traditional 4-3 defense. So he would be a strong side defensive end where we already have Frank Clark typically lined up on the weak side. So at minimum, he should be a good rotational piece and maybe have the opportunity to step in and even start. I really like the signing. I think that it has low risk, high upside.
It's a little concerning to me that he cleared waivers all the way to Kansas City. And then, the Chiefs were pretty much the last team to pick him up, and they did. I mean, I agree with you. It's low risk, but at the same time, there are documented examples of attitude issues with this guy at both of his stops, at both Dallas and Miami. And so I think as of right now, he's got the moniker of a first round draft bust. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be, I think, important for him if he wants to sort of shed that image for him to come in with the right attitude with the defending Super Bowl champs. I do think, now didn't Emmanuel Ogbah, didn't he sign with the Dolphins?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's a little interesting that Ogba went to the Dolphins and Charlton came from the Dolphins to Kansas City. So it was essentially kind of a trade, I think, between the two of them. I do think that I liked Emmanuel Ogba quite a bit, but I do think that there is a good amount of upside with him. I just hope that the attitude issues are gone by the time he makes it to Kansas City.
Yeah, and I kind of have, three reasons why I'm not concerned with that at all. First of all, I think him coming into an environment where one of the leaders on that defensive line is Frank Clark, his former college teammate, I think will go a long ways. When you have a buddy, someone that you really trust in your ear saying, hey, chill out, man, that's not, we don't do it like that here. I think that goes a long ways when it comes from someone as trusted as a former, college teammate. And then two, I just love the coaching staff that's in place. With Brandon Daly, the Chiefs D-line coach, I could rave about this guy all day. He is one of those. If you watch him when you talk or see clips of him at practice, he is just a fiery, get your attention, not real laid. I shouldn't even say that. He's not laid back even slightly. Get your attention. Usually that I think the kind of coach that really commands that respect. And then three, obviously with Andy Reid, he's got a really good history with bringing in players and dealing with players that have had problems like that in the past. And then going into the, I guess from an evaluation of the risk here, we'll give up a fifth round compensatory pick. Or Miami will gain a fifth-round compensatory pick for here. So it's kind of like you're trading Emmanuel Ogba for Taco Charlton in a fifth-round compensatory. So it's kind of, interesting to see how this will play out, and I like it.
You take a look at a guy like Tyrann Mathieu, who had, documented attitude issues at his different, stops previously. He comes to Kansas City. He's in that system with Andy Reid and, has completely changed, has flipped the script on what people thought about him, obviously in his time in Kansas City. So maybe Taco Charlton, can sort of be, Tyrann Mathieu 2.0 as far as that's concerned. The other thing I want to point out is think about the number of players that were former Cowboys that are now on the Chiefs squad, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Not currently, but just historically. You look at guys like Anthony Hitchens and Damian Wilson, and then historically guys like Morris Claiborne and Orlando Scandrick, and all these former Cowboys ended up in Kansas City. Now Taco Charlton is the next one in that long line. So a little bit, varied results, among the former Cowboys coming in to Kansas City. But I do think obviously it's a low risk play. As long as he can keep the attitude in check, it's a good play for Kansas City for sure. We've got just a few minutes left, and so we want to get into the Wichita Whiparound really quickly. Not going to talk a whole lot about this topic, but just want to point out that there still has been no decision made as far as the Wichita Wind Surge is concerned in minor league baseball, if there will even be a season this year all across the country due to the coronavirus. Now, there are reports that Major League Baseball is trying to move forward with a plan that would resume action in kind of a modified way with modified divisions and leagues moving forward. However, as we all know, Major League Baseball can make a good amount of money on television revenue share. Minor League Baseball pretty much lives on gate revenue. And if you can't have fans, then you can't make any money. In fact, you're going to be losing money for sure. So there is speculation out there that it could very well be that the entire minor league season is canceled, which would include the Wichita Wind Surge. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just really believe that something's going to be figured out. And unfortunately, I think what may be figured out may completely leave fans out of the equation. Obviously, as most minor league teams don't have television deals in place. But I think there's too much value for the MLB teams to have, stunted growth of their prospects. Where, even if it's, I'm talking about interleague scrimmages or inter-squad scrimmage. There will be some sort of something that may have absolute no relevance, will do nothing for Wichita, and the fans of the Wichita Wind Surge. But I think they're going to have something. It'll be really disappointing to see though if Wichita folks don't get out and experience that new stadium in the first year.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. They got to keep their farm system going somehow, and so that might end up being expanded rosters on the major league club. Who knows what that looks like for sure. At the same time, you got these guys that obviously really want to get out and play, and they want to play in Wichita. They want to play for this brand new franchise, brand new team, in a brand new stadium, and fans want to see that too here in Wichita. So, obviously, fingers crossed to, hopefully there will be some semblance of a minor league season in Wichita for sure. So we'll keep an eye on that as the weeks go on, and hopefully as things maybe potentially get back to normal, that we could see some kind of a minor league baseball season here in Wichita. We'll keep you posted on that. So a shortened Wichita Whip Around today, as we just wanted to touch on that. Our Finally Funny, before we wrap up, we're very near to the end of the show, and we're going to go back to our very first topic, and that's The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan and Bulls documentary on ESPN. And this happened on last week's episode. How about that story with Michael Jordan going to Las Vegas and trying to find Dennis Rodman in his hotel room, and Carmen Electra is there hiding behind a couch?
I mean,
insane.
It's truly like Michael Jordan was living the plot of Hangover. Just imagine the plot of Hangover, but with Michael Jordan as the main character in that, just trying to find Dennis Rodman. It is insane to think about, and it's funny to think about how that could even happen in today's, NBA with social media and all the coverage that those guys get. To think that an NBA star could just kind of gallivant around Vegas and not have a whole lot of the extra details out there, like that, some of which he is now putting out there on this documentary. It's been an awesome documentary, and I thought that was absolutely hilarious.
In the middle of the season, just being like, look, I gotta get out of here for a while, and I didn't even know that story, before. But as soon as, they said, you can go for 48 hours, my first thought was, there's no way he comes back in 48 hours. Mm-hmm. That's Dennis Rodman. The other thing that I want to point out, and this is not really funny, it's just an observation I made, Carmen Electra, where has she been? 20 years later, looks amazing. Just incredible. And she looked amazing 20 years ago, too.
She must be in that same cryotherapy with Ted Williams, just freezing the body. But, also I want to go back, and did you see Donovan Mitchell from the Utah Jazz had tweeted, he said, say what you want, but Dennis Rodman invented load management. And I thought that was a hilarious take on, that's essentially what we're asking for now that everybody's giving us a hard time about. But, that's it's kind of like if you remember the old, it's just Manny Ramirez, it's Manny being Manny. It's just Dennis being Dennis. That's kind of the same thing there, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been a great documentary. And speaking of Manny Ramirez, I did see that he wants to come back and play. And he's 48 years old, and he's going to try to play in Asia, I think.
Good for him. And I guess I'll just repeat it. That's just Manny being Manny.
Just Manny being Manny. Weston being Weston, and Tommy being Tommy. Doesn't really have the same ring to it, I don't think.
Not quite.
That's going to wrap things up for Keeper of the Games today. Don't forget you can download and subscribe so you can listen to the podcast anytime, anywhere, be notified when brand new episodes drop. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, and everywhere you find all your favorite podcasts. And don't forget also to follow us on social media. You can watch full episodes on YouTube. Search for Keeper of the Games. Same thing on Facebook, Keeper of the Games. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at COGPod. That's at KOG Pod. And don't forget to go to our website at cogpod.weebly.com. Weston, hit them with your Twitter handle.
At WMills94.
All right, and you can follow me anytime at Tweets from Tommy. We'll be back with another episode of Keeper of the Games in just a few days from now. Until then, for Weston Mills, I'm Tommy Castor. You've been listening to Keeper of the Games.
Take care, guys.
You've been listening to Keeper of the Games with Tommy Castor and Weston Mills. Don't forget to subscribe, download, and listen on all major podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. Find the podcast and videos on Facebook and YouTube at Keeper of the Games, and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at COGPod. That's KOG Pod.